Take me out to the ball game.
And now, Twitch It Dolphin Media presents The Joys of Mudville, a look at the current state of baseball. Now here are your hosts, Scott McIntyre, Andy Tom Chesson, and James Christopher. So we're back here on The Joys of Mudville. This is actually our last episode for the next 2 weeks, so we're excited because it's almost as if MLB ended the lockout, so we'd have something to talk about. Scott, did this happen quicker than you thought?
Yeah, a little bit. Although, I did say I thought we'd get in 162 games, but I thought it would be because of 7-inning doubleheaders, and apparently those are now frowned upon.
And no ghost runners.
Well, I mean,
no ghost. Oh God, I love that. Seriously, I'm the weirdo that likes a 21 inning marathon game, and really screws people over for the next couple of days. I kind of like that. Yeah.
Andy, you had a reply?
I'm sure I did, but I'm just dazzled by Scott, so I've forgotten it.
Well, there are two things I want to talk about coming out of. I think there were two sort of under the radar fallout from the CBA, and we'll dive into the first one. I know, Scott, you want to take the lead on talking about the proposed international draft.
Yeah, I think. So two things here. I want to make sure everybody's defined what is a traditional draft, what's the international draft. The traditional draft is for players in U.S., Canada, Puerto Rico, which, by the way, is a U.S. territory, so it kind of counts the same twice. But anyway, so if you're in U.S., Canada, or Puerto Rico, you fall under the traditional draft. If not, you're in the international draft. And the international draft primarily consists of players in Latin America. Now, that is the point of contention. That's the holdup right now that they've agreed to. They have agreed to not agree on anything about an international draft yet. They'll come back to it in June. And that was really how they move forward. But I think there's severe unfairness in the international draft to players. The Latin American players have a different standard by which they reach even the minor leagues, even from which they get brought in. It is traditional for these locations, Venezuela, Dominican Republic, wherever you may be in Latin America, to have training camps. A lot of former major leaguers go back down there and they open their camps. And so players come in, but these guys are having to start training kids as young as 10 or 11. And clubs are interested in trying to get kids to sign with them as early as 12 years old in some cases, so that whenever you do become old enough and you're 16, 18, and I can bring you to the States at 18 years of age and start playing, you've already locked in with me. So there's two problems here. First of all, from a club standpoint, the money that they're throwing at these Latin American players it's like a shell of a peanut. It's not even peanuts. It's a shell of a peanut per what they're throwing at these kids. So the kids are looking, I got this windfall. It's really not that much in the grand scheme of things, but I'm locked in with the Yankees or the Mets or the Astros or the Cardinals or whomever, the Dodgers, whomever it might be. They lock in with those players at such a young age. The problem is I want you to go to a little league field and I want you to tell me which one of the 12-year-olds is going to be a major leaguer. That's the big issue here. That these kids aren't by the time you're 16 years old, if you're not already signed up with a team, if you're not already in a deal, you're too old. There's a couple of very interesting articles that it's not that difficult to use your Googles and find on the internet, even where a lot of the guys that run these camps are saying we're trapped. By the time a guy's 16 years old, if he's a late bloomer, if he comes into a power hitting, if he comes into throwing hard at 16 years of age, he's already off the radar. And kids that are 17 and 18, well, if you're a great ball player at 17 or 18, well, too bad. The money's already been allocated. Things have been locked in for 11 and 12-year-olds. You don't have a place. And I realize that the same type of situation exists in soccer and hockey around the world. The problem is that that's the single playing field for soccer and hockey around the world. Well, it's a different environment for baseball depending on where you were born. And to me, that's just not right. That's just not right, because there's nobody that is out there. If you're an American kid and you're 23, 24, a fifth year senior, and you're a great pitcher, you still have a chance of landing with the major leagues.
Yeah.
You don't have that if you weren't born in the States.
Because it reminded me, Andy, of the Luis Garcia story, right? They kept talking about how he was, I think, an 18-year-old signee and how rare that was to find someone that good. So, Scott, I'm guessing then you're for the international draft.
Well, yes, depending on what they do with it, though. I mean, I understand that there is definitely a need to have separate drafts, the traditional draft, U.S., Canada, and Puerto Rico, and an international draft. I get it. I get why there's a need to have two separate things, but they've got to level the playing field a little bit. They've got to get something under control here. I don't have a problem with a kid who's growing up in abject poverty in a Latin American country being brought in to an organization at 11 or 12 years of age and getting treated well and getting treated with respect. I have no problem with that. What I have a problem with is them locking in the rights at that young. And therefore, if you come along at 16, 17, 18, there's not the opportunity for fairness among all players. That's where they've got to get this right. And if they blow this, this is bigger than baseball, in my opinion. If they blow this, it is a shot to people who were born in foreign countries. And I'm a big believer that regardless of where you were born, you're still a human. You deserve equal rights.
All right, Andy, what do you think about this whole concept of the international draft? I mean, to me, it just seems like a logistical nightmare, but what are your thoughts?
To me, the proof's going to be in the pudding. So what does it look like? How many rounds are we talking about? What happens to an undrafted player? What's the counter to some of Scott's argument, and I don't disagree with you, Scott, but the counter is that there are clubs who have made their bread and butter on not establishing just camps of baseball academies, the Astros being one of them, where these kids are signed for, Jose Altuve was signed for $15,000. Luis Garcia, I think, was a little bit less than that. As a teenager, Altuve actually got kicked out of the camp when he went to tryouts the first time, said, "You're too short, go away." He came back, eventually won a place. But this is life-changing for these kids, the vast majority of which are not going to make it to the major leagues. But they do go to school. They do have education.
Well, that's the important distinction, is these baseball academies are also teaching them English. They're teaching them. Yeah. It isn't just kick ground balls for 8 hours a day.
So my concern with the draft, an international draft, is that clubs stop doing that. Because when you talk about human rights in impoverished countries, education is always going to be the great equalizer. I don't want to see clubs take that away, because as bad as some of the things that Major League Baseball does, I think the clubs that have invested in Latin American countries have gotten it right to a large extent. Now, there's inequity that they need to solve. And I hate listening to Big Papi because I don't know what he's saying half the time. I don't know if it's actually Kenan Thompson doing an impressive impersonation half the time. But I think he has some really valid points. Major League Baseball historically likes to just slap something in place and then worry about the fallout later. Yeah. And his suggestion, and he's not against an international draft, was that it needs to be a tiered approach over 4 or 5, 6 years to get to what the end state's going to be, because otherwise you're going to disrupt a lot of lives in the wake of just trying to get talent acquisition.
So my question, one thing I would say, Andy, Major League Baseball, there's nothing against like a group of teams being able to come together and decide whether a player at any age has the talent. And then Major League Baseball has a pool, a fund in which they can give those kids and get those kids into the academies as well. I would love to see that approach. And then you don't draft them until they're actually, have pubes on their nuts.
Right. And I want to see a merger of those ideas, right? Not the pubes part, but I want to see a merger of, you have a draft, you have some way, because I don't really care about the competitive advantage that the Astros may have or the Yankees may have or whoever else is invested in those countries. But Major League Baseball could absolutely take over those camps, those academies, and they should. And frankly, the kids that get drafted probably should be the ones in those academies, which is going to put the onus on the clubs to make good decisions and keep it open to 12, 13, 14-year-olds, but also keep their eye on the 17 and 18-year-olds.
Yeah, I don't mind them having this is the approach that soccer has worldwide, whether you're in England, whether you're in Brazil, wherever. They have young kids that come into their program as a team, and that team is retaining their rights. But let's remember, there's not a world soccer draft, right? That doesn't exist. So so they are taking care of the kids at a young age with no promise if you're ever going to make it. We just see that you might have the talent, and we're going to help you out financially and educationally wise. That there's nothing wrong there. But when there's two separate, when there's uneven playing fields, it just feels wrong.
So when you're king for just one day and fixing this problem, feel free to steal that music clip for this. What do you do? When does an international youth that is eligible to be drafted, eligible to become a free agent in that same system? So when am I allowed to say, you know what, I want to go to this baseball academy? How many times do they get passed over in a draft from the ages of 12 to 18 before they can go try to pursue their path a different way?
Yeah, so for me, I don't think a player should be eligible to be drafted in an international draft until they're at least 16 years of age. And I say that because 16 is a legal drinking age in other countries. They recognize that as being an adult, so should Major League Baseball. For ages younger than 16, there should be a major league pool of teams that decide on which kids come into the academies and which ones aren't eligible.
But isn't that sort of
there's a screening process?
But by doing that, you're sort of just making the gatekeeper process earlier, right? Like, I think I agree. I think there's a problem and it needs to be equitable. I think you look at the movie Sugar, you learn all you need to know about how tough that life can be.
Yeah.
But I'm also a capitalist and I believe in a free market. In Houston, and I know, yeah, it's going to affect our team a lot, but Houston has been doing this for 30 years before any other team did. I feel like you should be able to give those kids, I really think that it needs to be sort of the way it is, like free agent, and just figure out a way to make it more equitable and make it better for the players.
And if that's the way it needs to wind up being, I'm okay with it. But I just don't think that a player, look at 12 years of age, you should you get a stipend? Should you get money if you're a good enough player so you can have the opportunity to grow into major league quality? Absolutely, I get that. We have that here in the States. Through youth organizations and Babe Ruth, Little League Baseball and all that. They need to be afforded those same opportunities. If you want to go the free agent route, that's fine, but you cannot sign a kid until they get to a certain age. There's still the pipeline coming in, but you're still going to have the opportunity to add kids to that later on. The problem is that you have individual teams that have signed so many kids, they don't have room in their facility for more that are showing pop at 17 years of age because I signed this kid up at 12 who may be good by he's 14. That's the disparity. That's the gap that has to be resolved somehow.
Well, I don't love the idea of Major League Baseball taking over an academy because Major League Baseball tends to screw up things they touch for a wide extent. But maybe this isn't a problem solving show necessarily, but maybe the way is that you're an Astros organization or you're a Cardinals organization or you're a Dodgers organization or whoever, you're investing in these academies and you get right of first refusal on a guy. Or if the guy goes in the draft, you get compensated financially somehow.
Because you developed it.
If you've put in $50,000 into this kid, and that's really pretty generous for what we're talking about, a lot of these Latin American players,
yep.
You get the $50,000 back. In the meantime, that kid gets drafted by the Pirates, and by the time they're a free agent, if they make the major leagues, they're probably going to have pretty fond feelings about your organization. So there's still some built-in advantage doing that. I want to see teams still be able to take advantage of opportunities that are there. Selfishly, I like that the Astros have invested a lot because they've gotten a lot of return out of it, and they don't have to invest as much in the domestic draft and those players and they can be wrong more because they have more selection.
And how does that work out, Scott? I mean, how does that work out if you let's get away from Latin America for a second. Like Shohei Ohtani, he comes over from Japan. Does he have to be subject to an international draft now, or does he get to do what he's done and negotiate as a free agent?
I think that's for me. I think it should remain the same if those players are drafted by another professional baseball league. So if a player's already been drafted by the KBO or in Taiwan or in Japan or wherever it may be. And once they're under contract to that team, right? They're in place. Once that contract ends and once they meet the free agent status of whatever that other league is, then I think they should be free agents as it is today and open in the fair market.
Or I would assume that would work a lot like the NBA does now. I can draft an international player, but they may be under contract somewhere else. I retain their rights from some period of time if I'm investing in the draft pick.
Yeah.
And then when they are free or we're able to negotiate an exit from that other contract, then they become part of my organization. It's going to be a lot of moving parts, especially dealing with established players, players that don't acknowledge that you drafted them. I mean,
yeah, and I don't even have a problem if something gets in place where there's a transfer rule where Major League Baseball can work out a deal with these other professional leagues around the world. So, okay, let's say I draft Shohei Ohtani at 18, 19 years of age, and I want him now, but he's under rights to a different team. Well, in soccer, what they do is they either work out a deal or they don't, and there's a transfer that happens, and I pay your team X amount of money to get this guy's rights. I got no problem with that. I think, once you reach a certain age and you're an adult, so to speak, you should be able to get yourself out on the free market unless you're under contract.
Well,
I just have a problem with 14-year-olds trying to make
for
that
those
decision.
of us that don't pay attention to soccer, that's what Jamie Tart was in Ted Lasso initially.
Good call. Jamie Tart. Jamie Tart.
Okay. All right, we're going to move on to a different topic. We'll obviously come back to this in midsummer when we find out if there's going to be one or not.
Yeah, we hope Major League Baseball comes back to it in midsummer too, don't we, Jim?
Yeah, exactly.
We agree to talk about it later. Yeah, that's worked out great in the past.
True. Although the players union doesn't want to give up that they don't want that qualifying offer thing, and I think it's an if then that. But have you guys seen, or let me just explain the proposal for what the baseball schedule will look like 2023 and beyond. It will be fewer division games, and everyone will play everyone. I think at least basically like a home and home.
No,
everybody plays once.
At least one.
There's been a lot of pushback against it. Some think it's going to weaken the whole distinction of American League and National League. And I sort of am okay with it because it means fewer West Coast games.
Well, it's a balanced schedule, right? They're at least as balanced as you can be in Major League Baseball. And so part of the reason that baseball thinks they need this is because they're moving to a 12-game playoff. And
12-team playoff.
12-team playoff. 12-game playoff.
12 is a long series. I'm just going to say that's.
Hey, the 1919 White Sox never mind. It's an 11-game series.
Andy, I hate to correct you, but cheating never happened in baseball till 2017.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. No, I think it's necessary. I think it's fine. And it's not just the West Coast. I think it is a beating right now to play 17 games against teams in your own division. I also think the math works out better when you get 32 teams and everything starts making sense, which is very clearly where Manfred wants this headed. So it is what it is. I don't mind it. I like the idea that we're going to get to see National League Central teams every year and National League East teams every year. Whereas right now we haven't played somebody from the Central regular season in 4 years.
5 or 6 years.
Yeah. And
I mean,
frankly,
Europe and Cardinals, 3 years
Oh, that's
ago?
right. Yeah, in 19. So, okay.
Yeah, so 3. And frankly, I don't want to play the National League East anytime soon, but
yeah. One home game. You just won one home game in 2019. Just one.
I kind of like it. I like the shift. And first of all, if you're going to put the DH across the board and everybody's playing the same game now, that's fine. Let's all play each other. So the AL-NL thing, to me, went away anyway whenever interleague started. The one team from this side faces that. The Super Bowl ratings don't go down, and oftentimes, not oft, but sometimes there's a rematch in the Super Bowl between teams because there's no AFL versus NFL split. They're AFC and NFC, and they all play each other. So I don't have a problem personally with the new schedule. I kind of like it since we have these rules, and furthermore, there's some freaking cupcakes over in the AL that have been there that I am eager to let the Cardinals have the opportunity to get a hold of.
You mean the entire American League Central?
Maybe.
I was going to reintroduce you to the American League West's favorite children, the Texas Rangers. I know you know them already, but there you go.
They just tipped the cap and call us their daddy.
But I do think Andy's spot on. I think the 12-team playoff is really the bellwether for expansion. And I think as soon as we figure out Oakland and Tampa Bay, expansion will come quick.
Yeah, baseball is going to leave Oakland, barring some miracle where Oakland decides they want to start investing or San Jose steps up. That market's going to lose that team. I still think that ends up being Vegas. But that and Tampa, to your point, have to settle before they can give Nashville and Portland or whoever else it is those next two franchises, because they're going to have to keep balance. And assuming the A's stay in the West, you're going to have another team in the West anyway. And so that's a big part of how all this has to work out.
I think in all sports, Vegas should have first right of refusal for any team leaving Oakland, period.
Fair.
But I do think that's what they're looking for, is to have a 32-team league that you can create more geographically make sense divisions and therefore geographically make sense time zones, I guess. But my thing is, there's a lot of fear that it might mean going to more of like an NBA style where you don't really have like the AL and the NL just sort of going away. Thoughts?
Go ahead, Andy.
I think that's Manfred's plan, but that was part of Bud Selig's plan too, was radical realignment that was first suggested, I think, in 97 or 98, was having a division that was the Mets, the Yankees, the Red Sox, teams in the Northeast that were all very geographically located near each other to save on travel costs. And the lines between those leagues were going to just be that you'd still have them, but it would be kind of like the NHL does with their divisions. They don't really mean anything. I guess they do now. For a while they didn't, because it was like the Norris League and okay, great. That doesn't mean anything. There'll be a division for math's sake, but it won't necessarily be. And I would assume they'll even keep the names, even though they got rid of all of the names in minor league baseball once they got control of that. But it won't mean anything. And I think Houston's status as the only team to reach the World Series in two different leagues is going to go away, because there's going to be a lot of movement between those leagues.
Yeah. I almost think what they ought to do, in my proposal, would be to basically divide the country in half, and every team on the east side of that divide is an AL team. Every team on the west side of that divide is an NL team. And that way you keep the traditional powers in both leagues intact.
That's tricky though, right? Because 66% of your teams are on one side of the Mississippi.
He didn't say it had to be an even line down the middle of the country.
That down the middle.
I wasn't saying the Mississippi's the dividing line. You have to pick and choose where that division is for your leagues.
Geographically, if I'm looking, that would be Dakotas down to Texas.
Hey, let me throw out something completely radical if you really want to get into parity. And if we're going to where we're playing each other all the time anyway, regardless of whether you're AL or NL, you could have rotating divisions. So the teams that finish the top 5 in the league one year become Division I the next year, and the next 5 or the next 6 rather. You could do this, and then divisions 4 through 6 become the AL, and divisions 1 through 3 are the NL. Look, man, I'm just saying it's set up for anything that radical. You could possibly do that. I do think geographical alignment obviously makes the most sense.
This is what soccer does to your brain. Cut it out.
No, but what I'm saying is look, you could achieve parity. Other teams, other leagues have done this in the past for a short amount of time, but you could rotate which division you're in to therefore achieve better results. Think about it. Next year you would have the Orioles, the Pirates, the Rangers, the Royals, and maybe the Tigers. I don't know, some other pathetic team. All in the same division. Somebody's got to win that division. Now they may win it with 71 wins, but hey, they're a division winner. The next year they go into the next league. I mean, you could do crazy stuff with this.
That feels like more creative than Rob Manfred's office is willing to be.
Sure, no, absolutely. But he's not going to live forever.
I'm a traditionalist. I want set divisions. I want to know that I can watch all the games and it not be 9:00 at night because, oh, the Astros are now in the Dodgers division.
So
No, I want that too. I'm just saying by having everybody playing the same game now, we're all on the DH. By having the 12 game postseason, you can get creative if the spirit moves you in the years to come.
Andy, I'll give you the last word.
Oh, no, I had a question about this year's schedule because the deadlines meant nothing. So we're playing 162 games. Have they said when the Astros will be playing neutral site games in Milwaukee or Tampa Bay this year yet?
Not yet. We have
Because
not
I assume
announced.
that's part of the deal.
TBD.
Yeah, TBD. They'll let us know about a week in advance. They'll let the opponents know now, but we'll know it about a week in advance.
Fantastic.
Well, guys, I mean, we could, it was a fun conversation today, but we can at least say that baseball is back. And here's what I mean by that, guys. And I know you two agree. Baseball has never went away. Major League Baseball is back. I saw an excellent tweet. I won't out the guy, but he's in charge of promotions for a minor league club. Actually, ironically enough, one we'll be visiting this year. And he said, if one more vendor sends me a buy stuff with baseball is back, baseball's been back. We've been working, and I won't be buying anything from your business now. So that's it. This has been the Joys of Mudville. We will be back in just a few weeks. Perfect.